It's Tuesday. It's the first day of July. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is Arirang News live from Seoul. Our top stories today. Seoul's Unification Minister isn't too optimistic about Pyongyang's so-called special proposal to halt all military activities starting this Friday. Japan's cabinet is poised to approve a landmark change in security policy, paving the way for its military to fight overseas. And World Cup kisses goodbye to Africa as Nigeria and Algeria leave with their heads held high, leaving France and Germany to face off in quarterfinals. We'll have those stories and more, but first, right here in Seoul. North Korea made a special proposal yesterday to the South asking to end all military hostilities starting Friday, but South Korea's top policymaker on North Korea says parts of that proposal cannot be accepted under the current circumstances. Now, speaking to lawmakers at the National Assembly Tuesday, Unification Minister Ryoo Kihl-jae said the latest proposal is along the same lines as a so-called important proposal issued back in January. Now, back then, Pyongyang proposed to end all cross-border slandering, only to resume it again a few months later. Now, Ryoo said North Korea appears to be aiming to show its efforts to mend inter-Korean ties. The Unification Ministry is expected to give an official response later this afternoon. And over in Hawaii, the top military officials of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan will hold talks Tuesday local time on North Korea and other key security-related issues. This on the sidelines of the ongoing RIMPAC exercises. Now, Seoul's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Choi Yoon-hee, will sit down with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts, Martin Dempsey and Shigeru Iwasaki, to discuss ways to deal with North Korea's nuclear threat. The U.S.-led trilateral meeting will end with a joint statement by the three commanders. The RIMPAC exercise, which kicked off at the end of June, is the world's largest international naval drill with 23 countries taking part. And this year's exercise is especially significant as China is participating in the U.S.-led drill for the very first time. South Korea will welcome Chinese President Xi Jinping to Seoul this week in a visit that could signal a very significant shift in the region's complicated power dynamics. The Chinese leader breaking with tradition and visiting the South before his country's traditional ally in Pyongyang will discuss ways to help denuclearize the Korean peninsula during talks with his South Korean counterpart Park Geun-hye. Our Park Ji-won reports.
This week's trip will mark the first time ever for a Chinese leader to visit South Korea before North Korea. Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit Seoul for 2 days starting this Thursday in a visit that is expected to send a strong message to Beijing's traditional ally. Relations between China and North Korea have soured recently. Beijing was not happy when Pyongyang went ahead with a third nuclear test in February of last year, despite China's warnings. China's leadership was also deeply disappointed by the purge and subsequent execution of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's uncle Chang Song-taek late last year. Chang, who enjoyed a good relationship with Beijing, have made major contributions to an expansion of commercial ties with China, while measures to end Pyongyang's nuclear program are expected to top the agenda during their bilateral summit talks. President Xi and South Korean President Park Geun-hye will also discuss other issues, including ways to deepen their economic cooperation. Watchers say that as China is South Korea's top trade partner and South Korea has the highest number of Chinese language proficiency test takers, it's only natural the two countries' ties have strengthened. The summit meeting also signifies a shift in multilateral relations in Northeast Asia, where the traditional Cold War front of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan versus North Korea, China and Russia is looking increasingly more complex. While South Korea and China continue to butt heads with Japan over various historical and territorial disputes, Japan and North Korea are taking strides to normalize their once frosty bilateral relations. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Now, the United States government is demanding North Korea free two recently detained American tourists as soon as possible.
Out of humanitarian concern for Mr. Fowle and Mr. Miller and their families, we request North Korea release them so they may return home.
Now, Washington's call comes after North Korean state media said Monday that there was enough evidence to move ahead with indictments against Matthew Miller and Jeffrey Fowle for carrying out what it called hostile acts against the regime. Now, the two men entered North Korea separately in April. The State Department also asked that North Korea grant Korean-American Kenneth Bae special amnesty and release him immediately. Now, Mr. Bae is serving a 15-year sentence with hard labor on charges of trying to overthrow the regime. North Korea and Japan have resumed high-level talks in Beijing to discuss follow-up measures to agreements made on the issue of Japanese nationals abducted by North Korea decades ago. And the meeting comes about a month after the two countries made a deal in Stockholm on re-investigating the abduction issue. And in return, Japan has promised to lift sanctions and resume humanitarian aid to North Korea, marking a diplomatic breakthrough between the two countries. Now, today's meeting comes just 48 hours after Pyongyang fired two short-range missiles into the East Sea, which is the body of water that lies between Korea and Japan. And Japanese officials lodged a strong protest against the launch during the opening part of that meeting. Now, shifting our focus to Japan, a historic shift is taking place in Japan today. The Abe administration is about to reinterpret Japan's more than 6-decade-long pacifist policy in a way that will allow Tokyo to play a greater military role in Asia. Well, Japan's ruling parties reportedly agreed on this Tuesday to lift a ban on the country's right to exercise collective self-defense. And the change is expected to be adopted in a cabinet resolution later today. And our Hwang Sang-hee has more on this very historic decision.
Japan's ruling parties have given the green light to a government proposal to end a ban that has kept the Japanese military from fighting overseas since World War II. This is according to a ruling party lawmaker who said the change will be adopted in a cabinet resolution later in the day. A draft of the cabinet resolution shows the change, which will significantly expand Japan's military options by lifting the ban on exercising collective self-defense, thereby allowing the country to aid its allies under an attack beyond its borders. Limits on activities in UN-led peacekeeping operations will also be eased. The move is being seen by some as the biggest shift in Japan's defense policy since the end of World War II. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has aggressively pursued the change since taking office 18 months ago, despite some public opposition stemming from concerns about entanglement in foreign wars. A poll conducted by Japan's Mainichi Shimbun over the weekend showed nearly 60% of the Japanese public is against the revision. Tokyo's latest move is sure to set off alarm bells in Seoul and Beijing, the victims of Japan's wartime aggression. The South Korean government has said that Japanese forces will not be allowed on the Korean peninsula without its consent. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Moon Gon-yong live from Seoul.
Global shopping market for the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and the Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. Korea's consumer price growth stayed in the 1% range for the 8th straight month in June. Now, a report by Statistics Korea says the country's consumer price index rose 1.7% last month from the previous year, the same growth rate recorded in May. The report shows that the core inflation rate, which excludes food and oil prices, rose 2.1% from the previous year, slightly lower than the 2.2% increase in May. The report also shows prices for agriculture, livestock, and fisheries products have declined by 1% from the year before, while electricity, tap water, and gas prices kept overall prices up with a jump of 4.2% in June. And on the trade front, Korea logged a trade surplus for the 29th straight month in June. Seoul's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy says that exports amounted to $47.8 billion last month, which is up 2.5% from a year earlier. while imports rose 4.5% from the previous year to stand at $42.6 billion. Now that translates to a trade surplus of $5.29 billion. However, Korea's stock market is losing its momentum, it seems like, with the benchmark Kospi fluctuating in the smallest margin ever in the first 6 months of this year. Analysts say this is mainly due to the slowing economic growth at home. And our Hwang Ji-hye tells us what this means, how a sluggish trade on the Korean stock market would affect the economy as well.
It seems like a pause button has been pushed on the Korean stock market. The Korea Exchange says that the nation's benchmark Kospi is losing its dynamics, with the market volatility in the first half of the year hitting its lowest point since 1990, when the market first opened. The index measuring the volatility of the market stood at a mere 0.6. The market is less volatile as it approaches zero. The figure was at over 2 in the second half of 2011, but has continued on a downward trajectory since then. The market volatility from 1990 until June this year stood at over 1.5, reflecting how stagnant the market was in the first 6 months of the year. And it's not just the dynamics, but also the number of transactions that remain subdued. The number of average daily transactions on the Kospi came in at around 23 million in the first half of the year, which marks the lowest level in 7.5 years. Analysts say the slow growth at home coming from sluggish domestic demand and slowing exports due to the strong local currency is keeping the stock market from perking up. They add that the outlook for the second half does not look that bright either, as they expect disappointing earnings from major listed companies like Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motor. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
And moving over to Korea's another trading platform, it's the Korean New Exchange, or otherwise known as the KONEX, and it marks its first anniversary today. Well, Korea's third stock market platform was designed specifically for small companies to raise capital, and it was born out of President Park Geun-hye's vision to promote an environment where startup businesses can flourish. But how well is the market doing so far? Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
This Tuesday marks the one-year anniversary of the foundation of the Korea New Exchange, or KONEX, a stock market tailor-made for startups. KONEX was set up to make it easier for small companies to raise funds and reduce their reliance on bank loans to start and run businesses. More than 55 companies are listed in the KONEX with a total market value of $1.2 billion. KONEX falls in line with President Park Geun-hye's initiative toward a creative economy, which envisions a convergence of creative ideas and entrepreneurship to create new jobs and markets. Kim Gun-ho, the president of the KONEX Association and FN Guide Incorporated, which is listed on the KONEX, says his company is building experience and taking an important step toward being listed on the tech-heavy Kosdaq.
Listed companies think it's a crucial step, a trial and error period to build a relationship with potential investors before listing on the Kosdaq. But most of them have not gained financially from listing on the KONEX, not yet at least.
The lack of participation in the KONEX has been pointed out as a deficiency. The amount of transactions in an average day is less than $198,000, with less than 48,000 shares traded daily. So to induce more investors, the government has lowered the standards of qualifications. The Financial Services Commission reduced the required deposit by 1/3 to 100 million Korean won, around $99,000. The commission also slashed the minimum number of trading units from 100 shares to 1 share, the same as the Kosdaq. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And now on to this piece of health news that could be the light at the end of the tunnel for many of you. Scientists around the world have tried and failed to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease since its discovery back in 1906. But now a Korean research team has identified the cause of memory loss from this most common form of dementia, and this could open up gateways to treatment of that fatal brain disease. Here's our Kwon So-ah.
In a scene from the Korean movie A Moment to Remember, a young woman suffering from Alzheimer's disease can't find her way home. Like her, the memory loss caused by the gradual damage of brain cells can often cause people to lose their way. In fact, in Korea, around 7,600 elderly people with Alzheimer's have been reported missing yearly. The disease is not only fatal, but incurable. But now, a Korean research team has discovered the source of what leads to the loss of memory in Alzheimer's, which is raising hopes of opening a new chapter in the development of treatments. The cause of the impairment, researchers say, lies in the so-called reactive astrocytes that develop once the brain is affected by the disease. Astrocytes are the most abundant cell type in the brain, and reactive astrocytes produce an acid called gamma-aminobutyric, or GABA. They found that these acids in affected mice began to produce abnormally large amounts of GABA, a major inhibitory neurotransmitter. An experiment showed that mice that were injected with an inhibitor called slandering, which suppresses the generation of GABA, regained their memories. However, after more than 2 weeks during which the injections were administered, the effects disappeared, which calls for the next step in the research process.
We found that the effects of slandering grow weaker when it is taken in for a long time. We are currently working on the development of 3 kinds of MAOB inhibitors with long-lasting efficacy.
The research, supported by the Korea Institute of Science and Technology, has been published in the highly cited medical journal Nature Medicine. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And now to the latest from the 2014 World Cup in Brazil. France made it to the quarterfinals in Monday's action, beating Nigeria 2-0. It was a relatively close match right up until Paul Pogba scored France's first goal in the 79th minute. And despite Nigeria's tireless efforts, Joseph Yabo's own goal secured France's advance to the last 8. France will meet Germany in the next round after the Germans beat Algeria 2-1 after extra time in a thrilling end-to-end match. Germany's Andre Schürrle scored 2 minutes after the start of extra time, and Mesut Özil netted Germany's second 1 minute before the end. Algeria managed to get a consolation goal in the last minute, but it was too late to make a dramatic comeback. Kickoff time for the France-Germany quarterfinals is Saturday, July 5th at 1 a.m. Korea time. And now for a short World Cup preview. The Swiss team may need its best efforts when it faces Argentina, which, despite a somewhat weak performance in the tournament so far, boasts one of the best attacks and is still the heavy favorite to win. Belgium will take on the U.S. in the day's other round of 16 match, with the stakes high for both teams. The European team has not reached the quarterfinals since 1986. While the U.S. wants to ride the momentum after emerging successfully from the so-called group of death. Now it's time for our daily arts and culture segment. Now, over the past decade, Korean musicals have made a pivotal turn and are now becoming more of a presence in the global musical theater market. Of course, Im Yoon-hee joins me for a closer look at Korean musicals and their spread to Asia. Good afternoon to you, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon.
Now, we've seen a growth in the popularity of musicals here in Korea, but tell us more about how Korean musicals are doing on the global stage.
Right, so Korean musicals have really become more popular both locally and abroad, and that's due in part to its close relationship with K-pop. But recently, Korean musicals have seen an expansion in Asia, especially in China. Take a look.
Finding Mr. Destiny is a 2006 musical by playwright Chang Yoo-jung, one that was a huge success in Korea and has even spread to China, becoming a part of the growing musical theater market there. It's just one of many musicals being introduced to the neighboring country, a venture being spearheaded by one of the leaders in the Korean entertainment industry, CJ A wide range of original Korean productions have been ushered into China due to the demand for more Korean performances that have captured the attention of younger audiences.
70% of the audience is made up of young people in their 20s to 40s. So in order to appeal to this young crowd, the content is very important. The point is to make it so that they can sympathize with the plot.
It's not just the modern performances that have been doing well. Traditional Korean performances by the Cheongdong Theater have also been hits with the local audience.
This is the first time in Fuzhou that I've seen a traditional Korean performance. I hope to see something like this again. I'm very excited.
The Chinese audience is very responsive in applause, so it gives me strength and makes the performance more fun.
The musical theater industry in China brings in an average of 1.5 trillion won per year in sales, or nearly $1.5 billion. And the Korean musical theater market has already grown to 5 times the size of that. The exchange between Korea and China in the musical theater market involves many factors in order to expand. And this coming September, a collaboration between theaters, production companies, and investment groups will gather for a Korea-China musical exposition.
Korean musicals have become the model for musical content and competition in China. In the musical market, competition has a very large role, so this is an opportunity for China to expand and for the two countries to work together.
The Korean musical is said by some to be the next vehicle for expansion abroad. And joint ventures such as the Korea-China musical relationship will hopefully carry the next Korean wave.
Well, Uniyuf, so this is for China. It's Korean musicals doing well in China, but what about other parts of Asia or other parts of the world?
Right, so Japan is also a very big customer of Korean musicals. We saw early in the report the musical Finding Mr. Destiny that was shown in China, but it was also shown in Japan as well and did very well, and that was spearheaded by CJENM as well. And so they're really trying to expand the Korean musicals into the other Asian countries.
Right, and you know, not only just musicals, but Korean musical stars. They're actually making headway into the global stage as well, right?
Right, so they are showing some extreme talent these days. One of the top Korean musical stars, Hong Kwang-ho, he actually debuted recently in Miss Saigon in the London's West End, and he made a really big debut, and he's been applauded for his performance there, and so that is a very, very big feat for Korean musical stars.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the musical culture here in Korea. I mean, you know, we've got a lot of Broadway musical fans as well as, you know, fans of those homegrown musicals, right?
Right. And so musicals are very popular here. They've really grown recently now. Broadway musicals were really popular in Korea a few years ago, and they still are popular now. Musicals such as Phantom of the Opera and Wicked, they were huge hits here, but it's interesting. Musicals like Lion King, which were just absolute sellouts in the United States, didn't do as well here.
Right. I mean, Lion King is still, you know, one of the leading performances right now as well in New York. But why is it that it's not doing so well here in Korea?
You know, people are saying it's attributed to this dramatic factor that really draws in the audiences here. And so the recipe for this dramatic factor that really seems to be the hit key for these musicals, that's also seems to be the key for the musicals in China and Japan as well. And so that's why the Korean musicals are doing so well in China.
All right. Well, you know, we will wait and look forward to more of Korean musicals making it big across Asia and perhaps one day all across the world as well.
And we hope to see that soon.
All right. Uni, thank you so much for that, and we will see you tomorrow.
I'll see you then.
Good afternoon. We can expect some nice sunny day today here in the capital, but there's more rain in store for us in Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do provinces. Now, the two areas can expect about 5 to 20 millimeters of rain with thunderstorm and hail in some places. And besides that, we can expect some scorching hot day all across the nation with most of the highs up into the 30s. Now, it also looks like there is a heat wave warning in effect over in Gyeongsang-buk-do province. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 32 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 31 and 28 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over to the high 20s, while Dokdo and Mangungang both tops out in the 27. Now, as for the weather conditions for World Cup in Brazil, fans can expect some cloudy days with rather cool temperatures in the mid-20s. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanya.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for that. And that's just about all from me at this hour. I'm Moon Gun-young. Hope you stay cool out there and check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time for Business Today.